Chapter 1: The Night Shift. The world outside was dark, covered in an eerie blanket of darkness that seemed to press against the windows of the Institute for Advanced Biotechnology Research like a suffocating shroud. Inside the building where I worked, however, it was a different story. A story that felt increasingly fragile with every passing minute. Bright lights flickered and buzzed as they tried to stay alive against the encroaching night, their electrical hum a constant reminder of the fragile balance between safety and terror. I am Alex Mercer, a former military personnel turned night guard, with eyes that have seen too much darkness and hands that know how to handle threats before they become problems. My job is to keep this place safe from any potential intruders during the dark hours when the world goes silent. But tonight feels different. The Institute wasn't just a building, it was a cathedral of science and secrets, a place where the lines between what was natural and what was unnatural blurred into something almost indescribable. In order to keep our work secure and undisturbed, there are specific rules that need to be followed strictly. These rules were written out in a thick, dusty tome called the Night Shift Handbook, its pages filled with warnings that seemed to come alive with each passing night. As I made my way down the dimly lit corridor, the familiar scent of antiseptic mixed with something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood and forgotten promises. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the cracked marble floor and the faint outlines of the various laboratories that stretched into the depths of the building. "Alex," a voice called from behind me, soft and almost imperceptible. I turned to see Dr. Eleanor Vance, the head of the Institute's Security Division, standing just outside the doorway of the main laboratory. She was a tall woman with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes a pale green that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Her uniform was immaculate, but her posture was tense, as if she'd been waiting for something terrible to happen. "Dr. Vance," I said, my voice low and steady. I was just about to begin my patrol. She nodded, her gaze never leaving the hallway. "The rules are not meant to be followed lightly, Alex. Not anymore." Her voice carried a quiet urgency that made my spine tingle. "There are whispers in the walls tonight." I followed her into the main laboratory, the fluorescent lights casting long, distorted shadows across the whitewashed walls. "What do you mean, Dr. Vance?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the far end of the room where a group of scientists were gathered around a large computer terminal. "They've been seeing things," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The same things you've been seeing." I turned to see Dr. Benjamin Carter, a junior researcher with dark, messy hair and eyes that seemed to hold a deep, unsettling intelligence. He was sitting at the terminal, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with a precision that suggested he knew what he was doing. "Dr. Carter?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine with a flicker of something that was almost recognition. "Alex," he murmured, "I've been watching you. You've been here before." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" Dr. Carter's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly. "They're coming for us," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The rules they've written, they're not just rules anymore." Before I could respond, the lights flickered again, the hum of the building growing louder. I turned to Dr. Vance, who had already begun to move toward the exit. "Alex," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "they're watching us too." I followed her out of the laboratory, the sound of footsteps echoing behind me. The hallway was now darker than before, the shadows seeming to stretch and twist in the dim light of my flashlight. As we approached the main entrance to the Institute, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the shadows. I glanced back at the laboratory, where Dr. Carter stood alone, his eyes fixed on the far wall as if he could see something beyond what we could. "Dr. Vance," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "what did you see?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out and touched my arm. "The rules," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "they're not meant to be followed. They're meant to be broken." I stared at her, my mind racing. The Institute had always been a place of cutting-edge science and innovation, but now it felt like something was watching us from the shadows, something that had been waiting for us all along. Tonight was just another routine night, or so I thought. The night was growing darker, the shadows stretching longer and more menacing. I could feel the weight of the Institute pressing down on me, the same weight that had been there since I first arrived as a night guard. I knew that whatever was happening wasn't just a simple case of mistaken identity or faulty equipment. Something was alive here, something that had been waiting in the shadows for a long time. And as I turned to follow Dr. Vance toward the exit, I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if the rules were broken? Would they save us, or would they be the final thing that got us killed? The corridor that ran between the administrative wing and the main laboratory was an endless stretch of darkened concrete and flickering fluorescent tubes. Alex Mercer stood at its threshold as the hour hand crept toward midnight, his flashlight beam cutting through the dimness like a silver blade. He could feel the weight of the Institute's secrets pressing against his chest, a cold, metallic heaviness that seemed to whisper in every corner. The night had been long, and the hum of generators was barely audible beneath the muffled thump of footsteps on the floor. The scent of antiseptic mingled with something more primal, an iron tang that made Alex's stomach lurch. He knew he could not afford a lapse. The rules were written in that dusty tome called the Night Shift Handbook, and they demanded his full attention. He paused, inhaled, and read the page again. Rule 1. Patrol every corridor by minute intervals. Rule 2. Record any anomalies on the log sheet. Rule 3. Maintain vigilance in all labs. The rules were simple, but the reality of their implementation was anything but. He slid a pen across his notebook and wrote, I am Alex Mercer. I am the night guard who will keep this place safe from intruders. The ink was still wet on the page as he closed the book, its pages smelling of dust and old paper. A soft rustle cut through the silence. Alex turned quickly, eyes catching a figure at the far end of the corridor, a silhouette against the backlit wall of the main lab. Dr. Lisa Wynn stepped out from behind the doorway with her hair in a loose knot and a tired smile on her lips. Her voice was low but carried a calm urgency that matched his own. Hey, she said, you've got to be careful out here. Alex nodded, feeling the familiar tug of duty tighten around him. He looked at her, then back toward the lab door. What's going on? He asked, his tone steady as an old watchmaker's hand. Lisa sighed and unfolded a thin sheet of paper from under her jacket. She slid it across the desk in front of Alex, holding it up as though revealing a map to hidden depths. I don't know how else to say this, but there have been reports of unusual occurrences happening in the building, she said, the words falling into place like notes on an old piano. Some people are even reporting seeing shadows moving around, as if someone or something is lurking just out of sight. Alex's eyes flicked over the paper, and his mind catalogued each line, a list of strange lights, a note about a low hum in the ventilation duct, a mention of a new security protocol that had been added to the handbook last night. He could hear the faint buzz of an old generator somewhere far beyond the lab, almost as if it were breathing. What do you want me to do? Alex asked, feeling the weight of his own responsibility settle on his shoulders. I'll keep an eye on everything, make sure nothing goes wrong, and don't let anyone enter or leave without proper clearance. Lisa nodded, her voice steadying. Of course, she said, her eyes flashing with a fierce determination that matched Alex's. I won't let anything happen. She turned to the door and pushed it open, revealing the main lab for the first time. The fluorescent lights cast long, distorted shadows across the whitewashed walls, and as Alex stepped into the room, he could feel the cold air seep into his bones. He paused in front of a large computer terminal where Dr. Benjamin Carter was already typing furiously. Carter's dark hair was slicked back, his eyes bright with an unsettling intelligence that seemed to hint at a deeper knowledge. Dr. Carter, Alex called out as he walked closer, the sound echoing through the lab. He felt his pulse quicken. This was the moment that mattered. Carter looked up, his face breaking into a smile that betrayed a new confidence. Alex, he murmured, I've been watching you. His voice carried a hint of wonder and pride, as if he had always known Alex's presence in the building. The two men stared at each other for a moment, then exchanged a nod of mutual respect. Alex felt a sudden surge of dread, the kind that came from an unspoken knowledge of danger. He could sense it like a chill running down his spine. "They're coming for us," Carter whispered, his voice low and urgent. "The rules they've written, they're not just rules anymore." Alex was ready to respond when he heard a sudden flicker of light that made the lab's ceiling tremble. He turned back to Dr. Vance, a tall woman with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes pale green and heavy with centuries of knowledge. Her uniform was immaculate, but her posture was tense, as if she'd been waiting for something terrible to happen. "Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "they're watching us too." The words were simple, yet they carried an ominous weight. Alex could feel the darkness pressing down on him, and he knew that whatever was happening wasn't just a simple case of mistaken identity or faulty equipment. Something was alive here, something that had been waiting in the shadows for a long time. As he walked back toward the exit, his flashlight beam flickered. It seemed to be struggling against the night's darkness, but Alex pressed on anyway. He could see the faint outline of a door behind him and felt as though every step was a step toward an unknown future. The hallway stretched out before him like a long road into an abyss. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him and ahead, and he felt the wind whisper through the air. He paused for a moment to check his log sheet again, reading each line aloud with confidence. "What did you see?" he asked, feeling the tension in his voice as if it could cut through any barrier. He turned back to Dr. Vance, who had already begun to move toward the exit. His hand touched Alex's arm, a gesture that felt like a promise of partnership. The rules were not meant to be followed lightly, or more than ever. They were made for people who knew how to listen, and they would be broken. The night was growing darker, the shadows stretching longer and more menacing. He could feel the weight of the Institute pressing down on him, a weight that had been there since he first arrived as a night guard. Alex understood now that what was happening wasn't just an accident, it was something that needed to be fought for. He looked back at the laboratory and felt a sense of dread rising in his chest. He knew that whatever was happening wasn't going to let anyone escape easily, but he also felt a fierce determination inside him, a drive that would carry him through the night. And as he turned to follow Dr. Vance toward the exit, Alex could feel the looming threat of doom, a looming darkness that threatened the very foundation of his world. The corridor leading to Dr. Raj Patel's lab was a graveyard of sound. Alex Mercer's boots crunched on aged linoleum that had once been white, now yellowed by decades of antiseptic and fear that stuck to the air like dampness, thick enough to taste. The fluorescent lights above sputtered, casting stripes of greenish light that made the cracks in the walls look like veins pulsing with something dark. Somewhere distant, a generator huffed, its breath rattling the vents like an old man's cough. "Murray?" Alex called, pausing at the supply closet door. He'd heard movement, scraping, faint but deliberate, coming from inside. The name hung in the air, heavy as the secret Murray carried. He was the only maintenance worker left who remembered the before times, when the Institute still buried its mistakes in the basements instead of stitching them back together. The door creaked open a crack. Murray's face peered out, squinting under a frayed hard hat. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept since the world outside had gone dark, and maybe he hadn't. In his hand he gripped a rusted wrench, its handle wrapped in tape that had turned the color of old blood. "Thought you was one of them," he muttered, voice rough as sandpaper. "You hear it too?" Alex's spine stiffened. "Hear what?" Murray stepped into the light, and Alex saw the sweat beading on his forehead, not from work but from something else. Fear. The pipes. "Last night I was down in sub-level 3, fixin' the boiler. Heard a noise in the vents, scritch like nails on concrete but slower. Like it was feeling its way. Then I saw it. A shape, in the dark, long as my arm, thin as a wire, moved like smoke, but when it hit the light, it left a trail, black, sticky, like tar." He swallowed hard, staring past Alex at the lab down the hall. "Patel's been in there all night. You think he knows?" Alex shook his head, but doubt gnawed at him. Patel was the head of genetic reconstruction, smart, precise, the kind of man who quoted Darwin at cocktail parties and treated anomaly reports like breaches of protocol. But smart men sometimes hid ugly things. "Just routine patrol," Alex said, though his voice didn't sound entirely sure. "You seen anyone else?" Murray laughed, but it was a hollow sound, like wind through an empty pipe. "Anyone else? Please, the rest of the staff?" They're either too busy counting their blessings the Institute still pays them, or too scared to look up from their desks. You ever notice how quiet it gets after midnight, Mercer? Not silent, quiet like something's holding its breath. He nodded toward Patel's lab, where a faint red glow seeped under the door. Go on, but if you hear that noise again, run. Don't bother yelling, no one'll come. With that, Murray slammed the supply closet door, and Alex was left alone with the hum of the vents and the memory of Murray's shaking hands. He took a deep breath, smelled formaldehyde, metal, and something sharper, ammonia, from the petri dishes in Patel's lab, and pushed open the door. The lab was a chaos of order. Dr. Patel stood at his desk, hunched over a stack of papers, his silver-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose. His hair, once neatly combed, stuck up in tufts, and his lab coat, usually immaculate, was stained with what looked like coffee, or was it blood? When he turned to face Alex, his eyes were narrow, angry, but there was a flicker behind them. Panic. Alex Mercer, Patel said, voice tight. What are you doing in my laboratory at 02:17 hours? Don't you have a corridor to patrol? I heard a noise, Alex said, nodding toward the vent above Patel's desk. It rattled suddenly, as if something had hit it from inside. Thought it was trouble. Patel's jaw tightened. He reached up, adjusting his glasses, and Alex noticed his fingers trembled badly. Trouble? He scoffed, but it wasn't a convincing laugh. That vent's been sealed since 2009. The Institute shut it down after the incident in Sublevel 7. No one goes down there anymore. He tapped a finger on a folder labeled Project, Chimera redacted. Not unless they want to join the walls. Alex's gaze drifted to the corner, where a row of petri dishes sat on a shelf. One glowed faintly pale green, pulsing like a heartbeat. What's that? He asked, nodding at it. Patel's smile was cold, classified. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to finish, and you've got rules to follow. He turned back to his desk, but not before muttering under his breath, some rules aren't meant to be kept. Alex lingered, watching the vent. The scratching grew louder, scritch, 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 and this time, he heard something else, a whisper too soft to make out, but definitely human. Dr. Patel? He said. Patel didn't look up. Go, before whatever's out there decides you're late for your shift. As Alex left the lab, he paused in the doorway, hand on the frame. The red glow from inside flickered, casting Patel's shadow on the wall, a shadow that seemed to move, twisting like smoke. When he turned back, Patel was still hunched over his desk, but his pen had stopped writing. He was staring at Alex, eyes wide, mouth open as if he'd tried to scream. Alex walked away quickly, but the whisper followed him down the corridor. They're here, and Murray's voice echoed in his head. If you hear that noise again, run. By the time he reached the security checkpoint, his flashlight beam was shaking. He looked up at the ceiling, where the vents ran like veins, and swore he saw a shape moving in the darkness, a thin, wire-like thing, gliding toward him. The night, he realized, wasn't just getting darker, it was hungry. The night had long since shed any pretense of mercy. By 2:57 a.m., the Institute's corridors weren't just dark, they breathed. The kind of breath that doesn't fill lungs but seeps through cracks, cold as cadaver skin and thick with the reek of something fermenting in the depths. Alex Mercer's boots crunched on linoleum that had once been white, now stained with a faint, iridescent sheen he couldn't name, not yet. His flashlight beam danced erratically, catching dust motes that swirled like tiny ghosts in the shadow of a rat scurrying into a hole marked Sublevel 7. Authorized personnel only. Alex? The voice crackled over his radio, shrill enough to make his teeth ache. Clara Voss, 24, intern, and the kind of person who kept a lucky rabbit's foot in her security desk drawer and a pocket full of Xanax, sounded like she'd seen a ghost. Dude, check camera 3 beta, east stairwell, now. Alex grunted, flipping open his radio. Clara, I'm on my way to Patel's lab. Patel can wait up. She cut him off, her tone urgent enough to override his exhaustion. The feed just flipped, like a funhouse mirror, and there was something moving, behind the metal racks, long, thin, not human. I swear, its fingers looked like they were made of glass. Alex paused at the intersection of corridors B and D, staring down the hall where Clara's camera fed should have shown nothing but empty lockers and a flickering Noner sign. The hum of the generators rose to a deafening pitch, vibrating in his skull like a warning. Stay at the desk, he said, though his voice didn't sound convinced even to himself. I'll check it on the way. Easy for you to say, she snapped, but there was a tremor in her words. You've got a gun, I've got a stapler and a dream. Before he could reply, a wet squelch echoed from behind him, closer than he thought. Alex spun, flashlight beam slamming into the hunched figure of Horace Hax Mackenzie, the night custodian. Hax was 65, with a beard like steel wool and eyes the color of old coffee, and he'd worked these halls since before Alex was born. He held a mop in one hand, the other pressed to a stain on the wall that looked suspiciously like the tar Murray had mentioned. Thought you heard something? Hax said, his voice gravelly enough to scrape paint off drywall. He didn't meet Alex's eyes. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, where the vents hissed like angry beasts. Sub-level 3's been talking tonight, whispers. Not the kind humans make. Whistling in the dark, Hax, Alex said, but even he didn't believe it. Hax had retired 3 times. Each time the Institute begged him back. You know these halls, Horace. You keep 'em quiet. Quiet until tonight. Hax chuckled, a sound that sounded more like a cough. Quiet? Please, this place ain't been quiet since Krell went missing. Back in '98 he was down in sub-level 7, stitching frog legs onto human spines. Said he was bridging the gap. Now, the walls sing his name at midnight. He nodded toward the stairwell Clara had fretted over. You heading that way? Save yourself the trouble. Whatever's down there ain't waiting for a escort. With that, Hax turned and shuffled off, his boots squelching louder now, too loud, like he was stepping in something viscous. Alex watched him go, then glanced back at his radio. Clara was still rambling. Alex? Hello? The west exit just unlocked. I didn't touch the keypad. It opened by itself. F off! Static hissed over the line, cutting her off. Alex's gut twisted. The west exit led directly to sub-level 7. And sub-level 7 hadn't been active since, well, since Krell. He took a deep breath, smelled formaldehyde, ozone, and something sharper, ammonia from Patel's lab, mixed with the faint coppery tang of blood. Patel's lab first, he told himself, then the stairwell. But as he rounded the corner toward Patel's door, the vent above his head rattled so loud it shook the lights, and from somewhere deep in the building a voice whispered, Not human, not quite. He's coming. Dr. Raj Patel's lab was always cold. Tonight, it felt like a freezer. The fluorescent lights sputtered, casting greenish stripes over his desk, where a stack of papers labeled Project Chimera Reclassified lay scattered. Patel himself stood by the petri dish rack, staring at a single container glowing red, pulsing, erratic, like a heartbeat that hadn't learned how to stop. When he turned to Alex, his glasses slipped down his nose and his eyes were wide, wild, guilty. Alex Mercer, he said, voice tight as a rusted hinge. What are you doing here? It's 2:59. You should be patrolling Corridor E. I heard something, Alex said, nodding at the vent. It rattled again, closer now. Clara saw movement in sub-level 7, the west exit unlocked by itself. Patel's jaw tightened. He reached for the petri dish, but his hand shook so hard he knocked over a beaker of what looked like ethanol. It splashed on the floor, hissing as it dissolved the iridescent sheen Alex had noticed earlier. That's not possible, Patel muttered. Sub-level 7's been sealed since Krell. Krell? Alex prompted. Hack's voice echoed in his head. You break the rules, they break you back. Patel flinched as if the name itself was a blow. A researcher. Insane. He believed we could merge species to create perfect beings. The Institute shut him down after he tried to stitch a cadaver's arm onto a live raccoon, locked him in sub-level 7. But he trailed off, staring at the petri dish. The red glow had intensified, pulsing so fast it looked like it might burst. He didn't stay locked in. Alex's spine stiffened. What are you talking about? Patel took a shaky breath, then gestured to the vent. The vents, they lead everywhere. To sub-level 3, to 7, to the old morgue places we thought were abandoned. Krell, he didn't die. He adapted. He started small, stitching together scraps, using the Institute's own experiments against us. The things the researchers are seeing, the shadows, that's him. Or it. He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on Alex's gun holster. It's alive, Alex. Not just a man in a vent. Something else. Something that grows when we look away. From the radio in Alex's pocket, Clara screamed, short, sharp, cut off by a guttural scritch-scritch that sounded like nails on bone. Then silence. Dead air. Patel paled. "Clara?" he whispered. Alex didn't answer. He was staring at the petri dish, which had stopped pulsing. Now it glowed steady, red as blood, and in the center, a tiny writhing shape had formed a finger, long, thin, with nails like glass. Patel let out a whimper. "It's listening," he said. "It knows we're talking about it." The vent above them rattled so loud the ceiling tiles fell, and from somewhere in the dark a voice, Clara's voice, whispered, "Help me, Ak." Alex reached for his gun, but his hand was shaking. He looked at Patel, then at the vent, then at the radio, which now showed a single text message. "It's in here. It saw me." Hack's words came back to him. "You break the rules, they break you back." But Alex hadn't broken any rules yet. Not yet. The vent burst open with a deafening roar, and something fell out. It was human-shaped, sort of. If human meant skin stretched tight over bones that bent wrong, eyes glowing yellow like embers, and fingers that ended in blades of glass. Its chest heaved, but there was no sound, no breath, no heartbeat. Just that faint, whispering voice echoing from its throat. "You shouldn't have looked!" Patel screamed. Alex raised his gun, but the creature moved faster than any human ever could, slamming into Patel, driving him backward into the petri dish rack. Glass shattered. The red fluid spilled over the creature's skin, making it glow brighter, hungrier. "Run," Patel gasped, blood pouring from a gash in his forehead. It feeds on fear." Alex didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted for the door, but not before glancing back. The creature had Patel pinned to the wall, its glass fingers sinking into Patel's chest. Patel's eyes met Alex's, wide and terrified. And then they went dark. The creature turned, its yellow eyes locking onto Alex. It opened its mouth, and the whispering voice boomed loud enough to shake the walls. "Next." Alex slammed the door shut, pressing his back against it. His radio crackled to life again, this time a new voice, deep and cold. "Rule 4. If you see it, you become it." He looked down at his hand. There, on his palm, was a tiny cut, red, bleeding, and in the light from his flashlight he saw something moving beneath the skin. A thread of glass, glowing faint red. Clara's scream echoed again. Somewhere down the hall, Hax moaned. Alex closed his eyes, breathed in the stench of fear and formaldehyde and rot. The night was still young, and it was hungry. The Institute's corridors after 3 a.m. aren't just empty, they're thirsty. Thirsty for sound, for light, for the warmth of a heartbeat that hasn't yet learned to fear the dark. Alex Mercer knew this. He'd spent months patrolling these halls, telling himself the creaks were just settling pipes, the shadows just tricks of the fluorescent lights. But tonight, the air itself felt like a living thing, thick, sticky, reeking of formaldehyde and something older, rot. The kind of rot that doesn't come from meat, but from ideas left to fester in concrete walls. He trudged down Corridor C, his flashlight beam chopping through the gloom like a blunt knife. At 3:17, the hourly hum of the generators spiked, an angry whine that vibrated in his teeth, and he caught a glimpse of something on the floor, a puddle, not of water, but of a substance that glowed faint green like bile. He stepped over it quickly, but the stain lingered on his boot, glowing brighter as if trying to burn through the rubber. Weird, he thought. Really weird. That's when he heard her. A voice, high and tremulous, like a mouse caught in a trap. You saw it too, didn't you?" Alex froze. Corridor C was supposed to be clear. Security cameras showed nothing but empty lockers and a rusted fire extinguisher labeled Danger Inert. But there, leaning against the wall by Station 7, was Dr. Lila Merrick. She was a neurobiologist, 30-something with wild curly hair pulled into a messy bun. Her lab coat stained with what looked like coffee, or maybe brain matter. In her hand she clutched a small vial, its contents swirling like liquid starlight, blue, electric, alive. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated so black they swallowed the green of her irises. "The walls," she breathed. "They breathe. I can hear them when it's quiet, whispers, not words, but meaning, like they're talking to me. About the subjects." She held up the vial, and Alex saw the label. Project. Echo. Neural resonance protocolled. Redacted twice. I was trying to map how the brain processes fear, she said, her voice cracking. But the subjects? They started talking back. Said they heard voices in the vents. Said the vents weren't just metal and concrete. That they were alive. Alex reached for the vial, curious, stupidly curious, but she pulled it away, her fingers digging into his wrist like a vice. Don't touch it, she hissed. They'll know you're looking. They'll find you. Her gaze darted to the ceiling, where the vents snaked like veins. Last night I left this in my office, just for 5 minutes. Came back, it was gone. But the vent above my desk? It had a smear, black, sticky, like tar. And when I wiped it off, my hands started to tingle, like ants were crawling under the skin. She lifted her sleeve, revealing a forearm dotted with tiny red welts, each one shaped like a vent duct. See? She whispered. They're marking me. Before Alex could reply, she scrambled to her feet, knocking over a stack of empty specimen jars. They clattered to the floor, echoing down the corridor like a death knell. Stay away from the vents, Elak! She shrieked, pointing at the ceiling. Stay away from sublevel 7. They're waiting. A low, guttural rumble shook the walls. Lila froze, her mouth hanging open. Then she turned and ran, her heels clicking against the linoleum, her lab coat flapping like a broken bird's wing. Alex watched her go, then glanced up at the vents. One of the grills trembled, just slightly, as if something had breathed against it from the other side. He shook his head. Paranoia, he told himself. Merrick's been working too many late nights. But when he looked down at his wrist, where she'd gripped him, he saw a faint red mark. Tiny, like a pinprick. But it glowed, same as the puddle on the floor. The security desk was quieter than usual. Clara's chair was empty, no lucky rabbit's foot on the monitor, no half-eaten granola bar on the counter. In her place sat Mia Chen, a new intern with a name tag that read Mikakela. She'd corrected Alex twice already, but he still called her Mia. She was 22, with a nervous habit of twisting a cracked keychain shaped like a rabbit's foot, just like Clara's, between her fingers. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she hadn't slept since she started. Clara's MIA, she said, not looking up from the monitor. The screen showed static except for one feed. East stairwell, camera 4 beta. The image was blurry, but Alex could make out a figure in a lab coat, standing still, facing the wall, as if waiting. She texted me at 2:58, Mia continued, her voice soft as moth wings. Said she heard scratching in sublevel 7. Said the west exit unlocked by itself. Then her radio cut out. I called security. No one answered. She tapped the screen. Look. The figure in the stairwell turned. Its face was wrong. The skin hung in loose folds like wet paper, and where eyes should have been were 2 glowing yellow orbs, too bright, too alien. Its lab coat was stained red, but Alex didn't think it was blood. It looked like something else. The figure tilted its head, as if hearing them, and Mia let out a tiny scream. Alex, she whispered. I keep forgetting to change the batteries in my radio. Clara said that's a security risk. But what if they hear when you're weak? When you're scared? She lifted the keychain, her thumb rubbing the crack. My mom gave this to me. Said it was lucky. But luck doesn't work here, does it? Not against that. Alex nodded, but his throat felt tight. He looked at the photo on Mia's desk. Clara and Mia grinning in front of the Institute's entrance, sun shining on their shoulders. Now the photo was tilted, slightly, as if someone had nudged it with a finger while Mia wasn't looking. Stay here, he said. I'll check on Clara. Mia's laugh was hollow. Please don't go. What if... Mia, he said, softer now. I'm the night guard. That's my job. He left without waiting for a reply. But as he turned the corner, he heard her whisper, Good luck. Dr. Raj Patel's lab smelled like regret. The kind of regret that comes from knowing you've crossed a line you can't uncross, from stitching frog legs to human spines, from locking madmen in basements and pretending they don't scream. Alex had been here 100 times, but tonight it felt different. The fluorescent lights flickered so hard they cast rainbows on the walls. The petri dishes on the shelf glowed with faint, sickly hues, green, red, purple. And Patel himself paced like a caged animal, his silver-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose every time he turned. Alive? Alex said, when Patel finally looked up. His voice was tight, almost violent. What do you mean alive? Patel stopped pacing, and for a second Alex saw the man beneath the panic. The brilliant geneticist who'd cured Parkinson's in mice, who'd once quoted the selfish gene at a dinner party like it was poetry. Now his eyes were bloodshot, his lab coat stained with something that looked like coffee, or maybe tears. The researchers, he said, gesturing to a stack of reports on his desk.
They're not just seeing things. Dr. Merrick. You met her, I assume? She came in here at 2:30, screaming about echoes in her subjects' brains. Said one of them woke up yelling, "The vents are watching me." Then she vanished. No security footage, no witnesses. Just gone. He slid a photo across the desk. It was Lila Merrick, standing in corridor C, same wild hair, same lab coat. But in the reflection of the window behind her there was another figure. A shadowy thing with too many arms, too many eyes, its skin stretching tight over bones that bent wrong. That's what they look like when they adapt, Patel whispered. When the rules break. Alex stared at the photo. The reflection didn't move, but when he blinked it seemed to smile. Clara, Alex said suddenly. She went missing too. Her radio cut out, the west exit unlocked by itself. Patel's jaw tightened. He reached for a drawer, pulled out a folder labeled Project Chimera Reclassified. The same one Alex had seen last week, when he'd caught a glimpse of Patel arguing with Dr. Vance in the hall. Krell, he muttered. It's Krell. Krell? Elias. Krell, Patel said, like the name was a curse. He worked here in '98, genetic reconstruction, my specialty back then. He believed we could merge species to create perfect beings. Stitched a cadaver's arm onto a live raccoon, a human heart into a shark. The Institute shut him down after he tried to fuse a child's brain with a computer. Locked him in sub-level 7. But he trailed off, staring at the vent above his desk. It rattled, once, sharp, deliberate. He didn't stay locked in, not really. Alex's flashlight beam caught something on Patel's wrist. A tiny red mark, same shape as Lila's, same glowing glow. What's that? He asked. Patel flinched, pulling his sleeve down. Experiment gone wrong, he lied. But Alex saw the lie in his eyes, the way they widened, the way he licked his lips like he tasted copper. From the vent above, a voice echoed. Soft, feminine, familiar. Lila? Alex breathed. The voice laughed, a high, shrill sound that made the windows rattle. No, it said. I'm Lila now. The vents. They let me see. They let me hear. Mia's radio crackled to life in Alex's pocket. He fumbled it out, and her voice filled the room, panicked, desperate. Alex, the west exit. It's open. And there's something in the stairwell. It has hands like glass. It touched my arm. I can feel it. Burning, Then static. Dead air. Patel paled. He grabbed Alex's arm, his fingers ice cold. Rule 4 isn't just a rule, Mercer, he whispered. It's a warning. The handbook says, if you see it, you become part of the echo. Part of the dark. He stared at Alex's wrist, where the red mark had spread. Now it looked like a tiny vent duct, glowing brighter. You've been infected. They know you're here. The lab door slammed shut. Alex turned the handle, locked. No power to the lock either. The lights flickered, then died, leaving them in pitch blackness. From somewhere in the dark, a low, guttural whisper filled the room. Welcome to the dark, Alex Mercer. We've been waiting for you, Patel screamed. Alex reached for his gun, but his hand was shaking too hard to grip the holster. He listened to the whispers, Mia's, Lila's, Clara's, all blending into one, echoing through the vents, through the walls, through his own skull. The Institute wasn't just a building. It was a monster. And it was hungry. The Institute's ventilation system wasn't built to be navigated by humans. It was a labyrinth of rusted steel, concrete tunnels that sloped downward like a throat leading to hell, and air so thick you could taste the decay part formaldehyde from the labs above, part something older, something that clung to the pipes like moss iron, rot, and the faint, acrid tang of regret. Alex Mercer knew this. He'd read the blueprints once, back when he still thought rules were just words on a page. Rule 5, ventilation shafts are off-limits to night staff. Rule 6, do not enter sub-level 7 without express authorization from Dr. Vance. But Clara's voice had looped in his head all morning. The west exit, unlocked by itself. I heard scratching, and Mia's later. It touched my arm. Burning. So when Dr. Alara Voss, Clara's older sister, a pathologist with a scalpel sharper than her tongue, had slipped him a crumpled note during his last patrol, he'd ignored the rules. The note had read, Sub-level 7 vents leak. Bring a flashlight. And a gun. They're in there. Alara's voice still echoed in his memory, tight with urgency when she'd pressed the note into his palm. Clara went down there yesterday, said she found something moving in the grating by Station 3. I checked the autopsy reports, 3 guards missing since last month. Their bodies were reassembled.
like someone was practicing surgery on them. Her eyes, normally sharp as a blade, had been red-rimmed, like she'd been up for days staring at cadavers that didn't stay dead. "You're the only one who can get in there without setting off alarms," she'd said. "Please, Alex, find her. Now." Alex huddled in the vent shaft, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom like a dying candle. The grate he'd pried open, Rule 7. "Do not damage Institute property." Fuck Rule 7 was still gaping behind him, the sound of Mia's distant radio chatter fading with every step. "Alex, please?" It had cut out 10 minutes ago, leaving only the drip of water from the ceiling, a rhythm that sounded like a clock ticking down to his death. He rounded a corner, and the stench hit him harder. Copper, like old blood ammonia, like petri dishes left open too long, and something sweet, cloying, like rotting fruit mixed with perfume. His boots squelched on the floor, not from water, but from a viscous substance that glistened under his light black, tar-like, and moving slowly, like honey draining from a spoon. He froze, staring at it. Murray's noise, he thought. Scritch, scritch. The same stuff Murray had described seeing in Sublevel 3. Then he heard it. A voice. Not loud, not human, but soft, like wind through a keyhole. A child's laugh, high and tremulous, followed by Clara's voice, distorted as if coming through water. "Alex. Don't." His blood ran cold. He called out, anyway, "Clara, Elara sent me. I'm here." The laugh faded. In its place came something else. A breath. Slow, wet, like a dog panting after a chase. But wrong. The breath didn't smell like animal, it smelled like the vents themselves, like rust and decay and hunger. Alex pushed forward, his heart slamming against his ribs. The tunnel narrowed ahead, the walls pressing in like fingers. He ducked under a low beam, his shoulder scraping against concrete that bit into his jacket. When he emerged on the other side, he stopped breathing. Bodies lined the tunnel. Not corpses, not exactly. They were assemblages. A man's torso stitched to a pig's legs, its skin stretched tight over bones that bent at wrong angles. A woman's head, eyes milky white and staring, mounted on a stalk of what looked like spinal cord, swaying gently as the vents rumbled. One figure wore Clara's lab coat, faded blue, with a coffee stain on the sleeve just like she'd spilled last Tuesday during lunch. Its arms were gone, replaced by two long, thin appendages that ended in blades of glass, glinting faintly in Alex's light. He gagged, clamping a hand over his mouth. "No," he whispered. "Clara, no." But then he saw it, tucked into the crack between two bodies. A small, plastic rabbit's foot keychain, Clara's lucky charm. The paint was chipped, but the tag still read My Clara 3 in curly handwriting. Alex reached for it, his fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. A dog tag. Jake Marlowe's dog tag. Jake. His old military buddy. The guy who'd laughed when Alex got assigned night guard here, saying, "At least you'll get paid to nap, Merce." But 3 months ago, Jake had vanished. The Institute said he resigned, but Elara had shown Alex the security footage. Jake, pale as a ghost, sprinting down Corridor D at 2:17 a.m., his uniform torn, blood streaming from his eyes. He'd slammed into the vent grate by Station 5 and then, nothing. No one heard from him again. The tag slipped out of Alex's hand, clattering to the floor, engraved on it. Jake Marlowe, U.S. Army, 2018-2023. Scrawled on the back, in shaky handwriting. "If you're reading this, they got me too. The vents don't just carry air, they carry them. They know your name. They know your fears." A low, guttural rumble shook the tunnel. Alex spun around, flashlight beam sweeping wildly. The vents above him began to clang, shutting one by one, starting with the grate he'd come through. The light from his flashlight flickered, dimming as if the batteries were dying. "No," he said, louder now, panic rising in his throat. "Don't." The creature stepped into the beam. It was tall, taller than Alex, by a head and thin,
like a man made of stretched skin and bones that didn't quite fit. Its face was a mess. One eye was yellow, glowing like an ember. The other was a gaping hole, lined with black, wet flesh. Its mouth was full of teeth, not human teeth, long, sharp, curved like daggers. And its fingers. Alex's blood turned to ice. They were glass, clear, thin, with edges so sharp they caught the light like broken starlight. It tilted its head, as if listening to a sound only it could hear. Then it opened its mouth, and a voice poured out. Clara's voice, but twisted, wrong, like her throat was full of gravel. "You shouldn't have come." Alex backed away, his hand flying to his gun, but his fingers were shaking too hard to grip the holster. The creature took a step forward, its glass fingers tapping against the tunnel wall, a rhythm Alex recognized. Scritch, scritch. Murray's noise, Clara's noise, Jake's noise. "Stay back, Alec," he shouted, but his voice sounded small, useless. The creature smiled, if you could call it that. Its lips pulled back, revealing more teeth, more darkness. "They told me you'd come," it said, and this time, the voice wasn't Clara's, it was Jake's, Alara's, all of them. "They said you were brave, that you wouldn't be afraid." Alex raised the flashlight, stabbing the beam into its eyes. The creature flinched, but only for a second. Then it lunged. He dove to the side, the creature's glass fingers slashing through the air where his head had been, cutting his jacket, grazing his shoulder, leaving a red line that burned like fire. He scrambled up, sprinting toward the nearest vent grate, but it was too far. The creature was on him, its weight crushing his back against the wall, its teeth sinking into his arm, not biting exactly, but scraping, like it was trying to taste him, to remember him. "Help! Help!" he screamed, but the words were torn from his throat by the creature's roar, a sound that shook the vents, that made the tar on the floor bubble and hiss. "Alara! Mia! Anyone!" The grate above his head exploded inward, metal flew everywhere, and a figure tumbled into the tunnel. Dr. Alara Voss, her lab coat torn, her face streaked with blood, but her eyes wild with determination. In her hand was a fire extinguisher, its pin pulled, foam spraying from the nozzle. "Now!" she shouted, tossing it to him. Alex caught it, barely, and squeezed the trigger. Foam erupted from the nozzle, hitting the creature square in the face. It howled, reeling back, its glass fingers stinging as the foam stuck to them, freezing them rigid. Alara grabbed his arm, yanking him toward the grate she'd broken through, toward a ladder leading up, toward light. "Go!" she shouted over her shoulder, firing a revolver she'd pulled from her coat. Where the hell had that come from? Eyeing at the creature's legs. The bullets bounced off, harmless, its skin was too tough, too wrong. "I'll hold it off." Alex didn't hesitate. He climbed the ladder, his hands slipping on the rusted rungs, his lungs burning from panic and exertion. When he reached the top, he slammed the grate shut behind him, pressing his ear to the metal. He heard Alara's screams, the creature's roars, the sound of glass shattering as she fired again, and then, silence. He collapsed to his knees, chest heaving. The flashlight in his hand died, leaving him in darkness. But he didn't care. He just sat there, trembling, and listened to the echo of Alara's voice, faint, distant, fading away. "Find Clara." Somewhere above, a generator sputtered to life. A light flickered on in the corridor outside, the security desk. Mia's chair was empty. The monitor showed static, except for one feed, East Stairwell, Camera 4 Beta. The image was clear now, bright as day. And in the center of the frame, standing perfectly still, wearing Clara's lab coat and Jake's dog tags, was a figure with yellow eyes and glass fingers. It smiled, and whispered, "Welcome home, Alex." The vents are never quiet. They remember every name. The vents aren't just tunnels, Alex thinks as he crawls. They're a grave with a ceiling. The air clings to his skin like wet wool, thick with the stench of formaldehyde, old, curdled, iron from rusted pipes and something else, organic, and a sweet cloying rot that reminds him of the overripe peaches his mom used to buy at the discount market, the kind that turned brown in the fruit bowl by noon. His flashlight beam dies twice before he remembers to tap the bulb. Stupid habit, military training, but it works. The light sputters back to life, illuminating only inches ahead of him, where the concrete walls pulse faintly, as if the institute itself is breathing through its pores. He's been in here 20 minutes. 20 minutes since Mia's radio went silent, since Alara's voice cracked over the comms. Clara's in sub-level 7, Alex. The vents, they leak. Follow the tar. Tar. He'd scoffed at first, Murray's stories about Krell's leftovers, but now his boots squelch on it with every step, a black, viscous goop that glistens under his light like oil mixed with blood. It stains his gloves, seeps into the cracks between his fingers, and when he wipes it on his sleeve, the fabric dissolves, leaving a hole where his wristwatch used to be. Honey Gertie had said that morning, leaning against the supply closet door with her wrench crossed over her chest, cough rattling like dry leaves in a tin can. You ever notice how the vents don't just carry air, they carry names? You hear that whisper sometimes, real soft, like a kid lost? That's not the wind, that's Krell talking to his pets. Gertie was the night maintenance tech, 60-something with a perm that looked like it had been set in concrete, and a voice like she'd smoked a pack of cigarettes every hour since 1987. She'd given him a piece of gum, spearmint, stale, and said, "Keep this in your pocket, Alex. If you start feeling funny, chew it fast. The sugar'll burn the bad stuff out." He'd laughed then. Now he fished the gum out, peels off the wrapper and chews it so hard his jaw aches, the sugar tastes like ash. A low scritch echoes ahead. Not the vent's usual hum. This is deliberate, purposeful. Alex freezes, pressing his back to the cold steel wall. The sound grows louder, closer, and then he sees it. A glint of glass, catching his flashlight beam. Glass fingers, long and thin, protruding from a crack in the concrete. He remembers Lila Merrick's arm, the welts shaped like vent ducts, glowing red beneath her sleeve. "They're marking you," she'd whispered. "Marking so they can find you." His breath catches. The fingers move slowly, like they're testing the air, and then a face emerges. One eye yellow as an ember, Clara's favorite color, the other, a gaping black hole lined with wet gray flesh. The mouth is full of teeth, not human teeth, long and curved, like the blades on the scalpels in the main lab. It tilts its head, and Alex swears he hears Clara's voice distorted. "Alex, don't." He lunges backward, but his boot catches on a loose tile, and he falls, sliding into a corner. The creature bursts from the crack, its body twisting like elastic as it reforms. One arm is a human forearm, fingers bent at impossible angles, the other is a bird's wing, feathers tattered and black, its torso is stitched from patches of skin, pale, olive, freckled, held together with thread that glows faint green, like the petri dishes in Patel's lab. Project Chimera, Alex thinks, bile rising. They didn't just experiment on animals. It roars, a sound like 1,000 people screaming at once and lunges. Alex rolls aside, the creature's glass fingers slashing through the air where his throat was, leaving a red line that burns like fire. He scrabbles for his gun, but his hand is shaking too hard to grip the holster. The creature is on him again, its weight crushing his ribs, teeth sinking into his shoulder, not biting, scraping, like it's trying to taste the fear in his blood.
"Get behind me!"
The voice cuts through the roar, shaky, urgent, but familiar. Alex looks up. Dr. Raj Patel stands in the vent opening, his lab coat torn at the sleeves, face streaked with something that might be sweat or tar. In his hand is a fire extinguisher, the pin pulled, foam spraying from the nozzle. He's breathing so hard his chest rises and falls like a bellows. "Now!" he shouts, tossing it to Alex. Alex catches it, barely, and squeezes the trigger. Foam erupts from the nozzle, hitting the creature square in the face. It howls high, keening and reels back, glass fingers stinging as the foam freezes them rigid. Patel grabs Alex's arm, yanking him toward a door hidden behind a false wall. "How did he find this?" and shoves him inside. The door slams shut with a bang, and Alex collapses to his knees, chest heaving. The room is small, dimly lit by a flickering emergency bulb. Old medical equipment lines the walls, a rusted operating table covered in dried black tar, not blood, tar, a shelf of empty vials labeled Project, Phantom, and Project, Shadow, a wall-mounted monitor that spits static, and then for a split second shows a face, Clara's face, pale, eyes wide, mouth open as if screaming. Then it cuts to black. Patel slams his back against the door, pressing a hand to the metal. "It's not going away," he gasps. His lab coat is soaked through, and when he lifts his sleeve, Alex sees a red mark on his wrist, same as Lila's, same as his own. A vent duct shape, glowing faint green. The resonance feed, Krell's still running it. The creatures, they're not just experiments, they're echoes, of fear, of us. A new voice cuts through the static, faint, high-pitched trembling. "Dr. Patel? Alex?" They turn. A figure crawls through the vent grate above, her lab coat covered in tar, hair matted to her forehead. It's Dr. Leah Rosen, the neurobiologist who worked on the Echo protocol before disappearing last week. Her eyes are red-rimmed, and she clutches a lockpick in one hand, the other pressed to a gash on her thigh that oozes black tar. "You found the server room," she gasps, crawling over to them. "It's down that hall, lock 3. If we shut off the resonance feed we can stop, whatever this is." Her voice cracks. Mia's still out there. Clara. I heard them screaming in the vents. Gertie bursts through the door next. "How?" Wrench in hand, face purple from exertion. "Told you them vents talk, Alec," she shouts, firing a pellet gun stolen from maintenance, she later admits at the creature's wing. The pellet hits home, and the creature howls again, but the wound closes almost instantly, skin stretching tight over bones that snap back into place. "It's healin'," Gertie screams. "We gotta move." Alex stands, his legs shaking, and nods toward the hall Leah pointed to. The door at the end is marked server room, authorized personnel only, but the keypad is jammed with a screwdriver. Someone broke in. Leah bends over it, fingers flying over the lockpick. "Almost. There," she mutters, but her hands are shaking so bad she slips, the pick clattering to the floor. Patel kneels beside her, taking the lockpick gently. "Let me." His hands are steady, surgeon's hands. And in 30 seconds, the lock clicks open. They burst through the door, and Alex freezes. The server room is a cathedral of technology. Rows of blinking computers, cables snaking across the floor like veins. But in the center stands a man, or something that was once a man, Elias Krell. His skin is gray, stretched tight over bones that protrude at wrong angles. His eyes are gone, replaced by 2 glowing yellow orbs, same as the creature's. His lab coat is stained with tar, and in his hand is a remote control, its screen displaying a single word, resonance active. He turns to them, and his voice, their voices, echoes through the room. Clara's laugh, Jake's scream, Mia's whisper, Lila's plea. "You shouldn't have come," he says, and it's all of them at once. "The Institute is alive, Alex. It remembers everything, and so do we." The computers behind him flicker, and the room shakes. Dust falls from the ceiling, revealing cracks in the concrete that widen with every second. Gertie grabs Alex's arm, her voice tight. "The vents are collapsing. We have to go." Leah points at Krell's remote. "Shoot it," she shouts. "That's what's powering them." Patel raises his fire extinguisher, but Krell smirks, their smirk, and presses a button. The room lights explode, and the walls begin to close in, concrete slabs sliding down from the ceiling, trapping them in a shrinking circle. Alex grabs Leah's hand, Patel takes Gertie's, and they sprint toward Krell, but he's too fast. He disappears into the shadows, his laughter echoing. "Welcome home, Alex. We've been waiting for you." The concrete slabs slam shut. Alex is pinned against the wall, his arm trapped between 2 slabs of steel. He looks down at his wrist. The red mark has spread, now covering his entire hand, glowing bright green. Gertie coughs, blood trickling from her mouth. "Honey, I told ya." Leah screams as a piece of debris cuts her leg open. Tar oozes from the wound, spreading up her calf. Patel presses a hand to Alex's shoulder, his eyes wild. "We have to shut it down. The main feed is in the core, Alec." Alex glances at the door they came through. It's now blocked by falling debris, no escape. Above them, the vents roar, and from somewhere deep in the Institute, a chorus of voices rises, hundreds of them, screaming their names, begging for help. Krell's voice booms through the speakers. "Rule 4 wasn't a warning, Alex. It was a promise. If you see it, you become part of the echo.
Alex looks at his hand. The green glow pulses, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. He thinks of Gertie's gum, stale and sweet, of Leah's lockpick, slipping from her fingers, of Patel's fire extinguisher, now empty. He thinks of Clara's rabbit's foot, tucked in his pocket, and for a second, he swears he hears her voice. "I'm sorry, Alex." The concrete slabs crush his arm. The pain is white hot, but beneath it, there's something else, a warmth, spreading through his veins, like the tar on his boots. He looks at his hand again. The green glow has merged with his skin, and where the concrete bit into him, new flesh grows, stitched flesh, glowing faint green. Gertie laughs, a wet, gurgly sound. "Welcome to the family, kid." Leah screams as her leg twists, bones breaking beneath the tar. Patel grabs Alex's face, his eyes tears and madness. "We have to keep fighting. For them." But Alex doesn't hear him. He hears the voices, the echo, whispering his name. "Alex, join us." The lights die. The only sound is the distant roar of the vents, and the faint pulse of the resonance feed, beating like a heart in the dark. Somewhere, a creature growls, and Alex smiles. The Institute doesn't just hold darkness, it breathes it. By 4:17 a.m., the air in sublevel 7 had thickened to the consistency of molasses, cold enough to make Alex's breath fog and heavy enough to weigh on his flak jacket like a second skin. He could taste iron in his mouth, not from the blood on his knuckles scraped against a rusted pipe an hour ago, but from the fear of it, the way the walls seemed to lean in, the vents humming a dirge that sounded suspiciously like Clara's voice, and the faint sweet stench of rot that clung to Jamie's sleeve like a second skin. "Jamie," Alex said, his voice flat as concrete. "Military training," he told himself. "Don't let them see you shake. Stay behind me. If something moves, yell." Jamie didn't look up from the floor. At 20, she was the new intern, the kind of kid who still kept a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Fluff in her locker. She'd shown it to him once, blushing when he teased her about childish crap. Now her hair was matted with tar, her uniform torn at the thigh, and her voice came out in a stutter that made Alex's jaw tighten. "Reminds me of Gertie, back when she first started." "Yes, sir," she whispered, gripping the flashlight Alex had lent her. His own died 20 minutes ago. The batteries were dead, or something else had drained them. "I won't make a sound." Beside them, Dr. Raj Patel paced, his lab coat flapping like a flag in a storm. His glasses had slipped down his nose again, and Alex noticed fresh welts on his neck, pale, raised, shaped exactly like the vent grills they'd been crawling through since 3 a.m. "The resonance feed's still active," Patel muttered, tapping a tablet that sputtered to life every 5 seconds, displaying static instead of maps. "Krell's not just a man, Alex. He's code, buried in the Institute's mainframe. We shut down one creature, and 10 more wake up." "Then we find the mainframe," Alex said, kicking a chunk of concrete that clattered into the darkness. "Burn it out." Patel laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that made Jamie flinch. "Easy for you to say. The main server room's in the core, under the old morgue. And the only way there is through the null corridor. Concrete Company forgot to map that one. It's a maze of flooded tunnels, lined with reminders." He swallowed hard, staring at his hands as if they might betray him next. "Reminders of what we did." Jamie's flashlight beam flickered, catching something on the wall. A name, scrawled in what looked like blood, Clara Voss. Beneath it, another, Jake Marlowe, then M.I.A. Chen. Alex's throat went dry. He'd seen those names on the missing persons reports Alara had slipped him last week. The guards, the interns, the researchers who'd resigned or taken leave. Now they were graffiti, carved into the Institute's bones. Dr. Voss said. Jamie started, then stopped, her voice rising to a whisper. "The null corridor. It's where they threw the failed experiments, right?" Patel nodded. Krell called them echoes, fragments of fear, stitched into flesh. They don't die, they just wait. A low, guttural growl echoed from ahead. Alex froze. So did Jamie, her flashlight beam shaking so hard it painted the walls gold. Patel reached for his pocket, pulling out a crumpled piece of gum spearmint. Alex recognized Gertie's brand. He offered it to Jamie, who took it trembling, peeling off the wrapper like it was dynamite. "Chew it!" Gertie's voice seemed to echo through the tunnels, distant but loud.
Sugar burns the bad stuff out. The growl came again, closer. This time, Alex heard something else. A whimper. Familiar. Clara's whimper.
He sprinted forward, Patel and Jamie hot on his heels. The corridor narrowed, the walls pressing in like hands, until they reached a steel door marked Null Corridor, Authorized Personnel Only. The lock was jammed with tar, black, viscous, glowing faintly green under Jamie's light.
Patel, Alex said, you got that fire extinguisher from earlier.
Patel nodded, pulling it from his bag. The canister was half empty, but when he aimed it at the lock and squeezed, foam erupted, dissolving the tar in seconds. The door creaked open, revealing a tunnel so flooded the water came up to their shins, cold, black and thick with something that looked like hair. Stay together, Alex said, stepping over a body, or what was left of one. A man's torso, stitched to a goat's legs, skin stretched tight over bones that bent at wrong angles. Its eyes were open, milky white, and when Alex stared into them, he saw Clara's face, smiling, sad, sorry. He shook his head. Hallucinations, fear, but Jamie let out a scream anyway, pointing at the ceiling. A dozen tiny figures hung from the vents, their bodies swaying gently, faces covered in tar. One dropped to the floor, landing with a splat, its skin dissolved into the water, leaving only a lock of brown hair, Clara's hair.
Run! Patel shouted, grabbing Jamie's arm and pulling her forward. Alex followed, his boots sloshing through the muck, the weight of Clara's rabbit's foot in his pocket burning like a brand. Find Clara, Ilara's words, but now he wondered, did we ever find anyone?
The Null Corridor ended at a steel door, massive rusted marked core server room, Krell Memorial Lab. A keypad hung beside it, but the numbers were worn smooth, as if someone had pressed them 1,000 times.
Passwords echoes, Jamie whispered, her voice barely audible. I heard Dr. Rosen say it once. She was talking about unlocking the resonance. Alex raised an eyebrow. You remember that?
Jamie smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I take notes, from my mom. She says pay attention to the small things, they save you. She typed echoes into the keypad. The door unlocked with a ding, and they stepped inside.
The lab was a cathedral of horror. Rows of computers lined the walls, their screens glowing green and displaying code that looked like blood cells multiplying. In the center stood a machine tall silver, pulsing with a faint red light, labeled Resonance Core Project, Chimera Alpha. Beneath it, a pool of tar glistened, and floating in it were hundreds of tiny objects, teeth, fingers, a rabbit's foot, Clara's, a keychain shaped like a rabbit, Mia's. And in the corner, standing perfectly still, was Clara. Or what was left of her. Her lab coat was gone, replaced by skin that shimmered like oil green, iridescent, alive. Her eyes were yellow, glowing like embers, and her fingers. They were glass, sharp enough to cut the air. When she turned to face them, her voice was Clara's, but twisted, wrong, like her throat was full of gravel. You shouldn't have come. Behind her, more echoes emerged. Jake, his military jacket torn, teeth filed to points, Mia, her intern badge still clipped to her chest, skin stretched tight over a skeleton that bent backward. Lila Merrick, her neurobiology notes crumpled in her hand, eyes milky white. They surrounded them, moving slowly, deliberately, their glass fingers tapping the floor in a rhythm Alex recognized. Scritch, scritch. Murray's noise. Gertie's noise. Rule 4, Patel breathed, staring at the resonance core. If you see it, you become part of the echo. That's not a warning, it's a promise.
Clara stepped forward, her glass fingers extending toward Jamie. Join us, Jamie. It's warm. The dark doesn't hurt anymore.
Jamie screamed, backing away into Alex, who grabbed her and pulled her behind him. No, he shouted. We're not gonna let you. A beam of light cut through the green glow. Dr. Ilara Voss stood in the doorway, her pathologist's coat stained with tar, a revolver in one hand, a fire extinguisher in the other. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were hard. Surgeon's eyes, Alex thought. She's seen worse. Alex, she shouted, get to the core. I'll hold them off. You rhymed? I'm a Voss, Ilara said, grinning wildly. We don't run, we fight.
She fired the revolver.
The bullet hit Clara square in the chest, but it didn't slow her down. Instead, the wound closed, skin stretching tight over glass bones. Alara cursed, grabbing the fire extinguisher and spraying foam at Jake, who howled as the foam froze his glass fingers to the floor. "Now!" Patel shouted, pointing at the resonance core. "Pull the plug! It's the only way!" Alex didn't hesitate. He sprinted across the lab, dodging Mia's lunges. Her glass fingers grazed his arm, leaving a red line that burned like fire, and grabbed the cord plugged into the core. It was hot, scalding, but he yanked it free anyway. The machine sputtered, then exploded in a shower of sparks, sending tar and green light flying everywhere. The echoes screamed, a chorus of voices, high and low, familiar and strange, and began to dissolve. Clara's skin melted away, revealing the tar beneath. Jake's jacket turned to ash. Mia's keychain fell to the floor, rusting instantly. But as they dissolved, Alex saw something else, a figure in the center of the green light, Elias Krell, his skin gray, his eyes glowing yellow, smiling like he'd won. "Foolish children," Krell's voice boomed through the speakers, echoing Clara's, Jake's, Mia's, all at once. "You think you can destroy me? The Institute is alive. It feeds on fear, on you." The walls began to shake. Cracks spread across the ceiling, pouring tar into the room. Jamie coughed, clutching her throat. Her skin was turning green, faint but visible beneath her sleeve. "Alex, it's warm," she whispered, smiling sadly. Alara grabbed Alex's arm, pulling him toward the door. "We have to go," she shouted over the roar of the collapsing ceiling. "Now!" They ran, Jamie stumbling behind them, her steps growing slower as the green spread up her arms. Patel lagged behind, staring at his hands. They were glowing too, faint green, pulsing like the resonance core. "I'm sorry," he whispered to Alex, his voice breaking. "I should have stopped Krell years ago." "You didn't do this," Alex said, but he didn't believe it. Not really. The door slammed shut behind them just as a chunk of ceiling crashed through the lab, burying Clara's remains under tar. Alara leaned against the door, panting, her revolver smoking. "Is everyone—" She stopped, staring at Jamie. The green had spread to her face now, her eyes glowing yellow. Jamie looked up at Alex, her voice soft and strange. "It's okay, Alex. They're waiting for me." "Clara," she said hello. Alex shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "No! No, Jamie! Don't!" She reached out, her glass fingers now her fingers brushing his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she smiled, and dissolved into tar, leaving only the rabbit's foot keychain, Mia's, clutched in her hand. Alara knelt beside Jamie, picking up the keychain. Her hands shook as she pressed it to her chest. She was so young, she murmured. Patel collapsed to his knees, sobbing. His skin was fully green now, veins pulsing like neon lights. "The Institute, it's in all of us," he said. "We can't escape." Alex stared at the keychain in Alara's hand. Mia's rabbit's foot, chipped and worn. He thought of Gertie's gum, stale and sweet, of Clara's rabbit's foot, tucked in his pocket, of Jake's dog tag, engraved with his name. We're all echoes now, he realized, just waiting to be found. The vents above them rumbled, and a new voice echoed through the tunnels, soft, high-pitched, familiar. "Alex, come home." Alara looked up, her eyes wide. What was that? Alex didn't answer. He knew it was Jamie, or Clara, or Mia, or Krell, or all of them. He pulled out Clara's rabbit's foot from his pocket, tossing it to Alara. "Take this," he said, "for your sister." Alara caught it, her fingers trembling. "What are you going to do?" Alex glanced at the core server room door, now blocked by falling debris, at Patel, dissolving into tar on the floor, at Jamie's empty hand, still reaching for him. He thought of Gertie's last words. The vents don't just carry air, they carry names. He thought of the rulebook, tucked in his locker. Rule 4, if you see it, you become part of the echo. And he smiled, because he knew now, the Institute wasn't a building, it was a hunger. And hunger doesn't die, it waits. He turned toward the null corridor, the sound of the echoes growing louder. Clara's laugh, Jake's scream, Mia's whisper, and walked into the darkness. Somewhere, a creature howled, and Alex whispered back,
The Institute never sleeps, it only waits for the next echo.